What do you think, Kathy? Should I go ahead and get started?
I think we're good to go.
Seems like we have one or two people still coming, but we've kind of reached a plateau here. So I think I will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to welcome you to the next webinar being sponsored by the Histiocyte Society and promoted by the Rare Histiocytic Disorders Working Group. So thank you very much for coming to join our webinar today. During today's webinar, we will be discussing updates on clinical trials and registries being run by some of the society members. So Kathy, if you don't mind advancing the slides, that would be great. So as you all know, we are a wonderful society of about 250 physicians and scientists from around the globe. And, we're all committed to improving knowledge about histiocytosis, carrying out research in the diseases, and ultimately to improve the outcomes for affected children and adults. Next slide, please. So some housekeeping information for everyone. So participants will be muted. If you have comments, so for the panelists, particularly just simple comments for Kathy or I or the others, please put them in the chat box. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen. And after you click on that, you'll see the area in the right that will come up where you can type your message. Next slide. Now, if you have questions specifically for the speakers, there will be a Q&A section as highlighted here. So you can click on that and put your question in it, and those questions will be directed, time permitting, to the different presenters. You can like a question in the Q&A box if your question has already been asked by someone else. Next slide, please. We encourage everyone watching to become members of the society. Of course, your involvement in the society will help us to further grow, carry out more research, and to quickly find better treatments and a cure for patients with histiocytosis worldwide. Next slide. I remind all of you that our next annual meeting of the Society will be held in Goa, India from November 7th to 9th. We do have a special education day, which will occur one day prior to the regular meeting. And during this special education day, we will be providing information about histiocytic disorders. And our goal really is to network from colleagues around the world to try to begin to develop guidelines for the treatment of histiocytosis in under-resourced countries. So for those of you coming in person to the meeting, please don't forget to apply for an e-tourist visa. The ability to apply for this will start 30 days in advance of your arrival date. Also, the airports are about an hour to an hour and a half from the meeting venue. We will be coordinating transportation for people who will be flying in to Goa and need transport to the meeting. So we'll soon be sending a form to you to collect information to help facilitate transport. Next slide. After this presentation, there will be a survey that should pop up when the meeting ends. Please feel free to complete the survey, which will only allow us to improve our webinars for the future. So thank you very much. And next slide. All right, so today we are very fortunate to have 4 speakers. Our first will be Dr. Usama Abla, who will be speaking about the International Rare Histiocytic Disorders Registry. That will be followed by Milan Minkov, who will speak about LCH-IV, Kai Lemberg, who will speak about the HLH Registry, and then Michael Jordan, who will be speaking about INTO-HLH. So thank you very much. Usama, I turn the stage over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning and good afternoon. I would like to give an update about our Rare Histiocytosis Registry. Next slide. So as we all know, the primary objectives were to collect retrospective and prospective clinical treatment and outcome data about patients with rare histiocytic disorders at the international level, and to use the validated cases to improve our scientific categorization of the histiocytic disorders and to understand their distinguishing, overlapping features and possible relationships. And as secondary objectives, we'd like to use the registry data to hopefully develop future treatment guidelines for these rare disorders. And we do have our biobank with objectives to have a repository of biological samples of the IRHDs to try to identify possibly novel targets which could help developing novel targeted therapies. So in terms of eligibility criteria, we include the cutaneous non-LCH disorders like the JXG family, the reticulocytoma, the Rosai-Dorfman disease, the indeterminate cell histiocytosis, but also those cutaneous who have a lot of systemic involvement like cytoma disseminatum, multicentric reticulocytosis, the systemic non-LCH disorders like systemic JXG, Erdheim-Chester disease, multisystem Rosai-Dorfman, but also the new entity, the ALK-positive histiocytosis, malignant histiocytic neoplasms, and the mixed histiocytosis, which have actually been reported on in the last few years. Any age of diagnosis, so children and adults, we have to have a diagnosis of IRHD before or after the opening of the registry. Cases from 1995 until now and prospectively, you have to have a suitable pathology sample available for central review, consents as well. And we exclude all patients who are non-RHD when the pathology sample is not available, and anyone before 1995. Next slide. So in terms of enrollment, patients will be enrolled through a REDCap database where the submitted physician put the data in, directly into the database. You have to have local ethics review, although now we've recently allowed telephonic consents for small centers if they allow that without an ethics review. 3 central pathology reviewers, one in Europe, Dr. Jean-François Emile, one in US, Dr. Jennifer Pekarsik, and one in South America, Dr. Laura Galluzzo. The oversight will be at SickKids in Toronto, and the Rare Histiocytic Disorder Steering Committee and Scientific Committees also will be the regulatory committees. Next slide. So as you can see, we started enrollment in April 2015, and you can see that the enrollment has improved throughout the years. Even during the pandemic, we still enrolled patients. And so far, we have 214 cases enrolled as of July 29 of this year. Next slide. And you can see the enrollment, the highest enrollment was from Memorial Sloan Kettering with Eli Diamond, followed by Argentina, ourselves in Toronto, and then in Europe, Italy is the highest recruiter, but we have other countries as well. Next slide. As you can see on the left side, the central pathology review was completed in most cases, but we still have 80 cases without a finalized review. We're working on that. And among the cases of the diagnosis, GXG was the most common at 34%, Rosai-Dorfman 27%, ECD 21%, and the other entities were less common, with the malignant histiocytic neoplasms 8%. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have 214 cases enrolled, 133 complete central pathology, 111 were confirmed RHD, 22 were excluded because of other diagnoses. We have 192 cases in the current analysis with a median age of 11 years. Most of them, 58%, were males. Among the mutation analysis data that's available, we have 22 who were BRAF V600E positive, 3 BRAF other, 7 MAP2K plus positive, and 8 cases KRAS positive. We have 66 JXG, 41 ECD, 51 Rosai-Dorfman, 16 malignant histiocytic neoplasms, 7 ALK-positive histiocytosis, 6 indeterminate cell, and 5 mixed histiocytosis. With a median follow-up of 29.6 months, we have 94.8% patients alive in CR or stable disease, with event-free survival of 84%, 15% of the cases relapsed, 5 died, 4 from progressive disease, 2 of them had systemic malignant histiocytic neoplasms, 1 of them were secondary to ALL, 1 was nodal, and 1 was systemic Rosai-Dorfman, and 1 patient died from toxicity. This was a GXG case who developed secondary ALL. Next slide. So in summary, the RHDs are characterized by pathological, clinical, and molecular diversity with variable responses to conventional therapies. The central pathology review identified 16.5% diagnosis other than RHD and was particularly helpful in the malignant histiocytic group. Localized cases respond well to observation or steroids or surgery, and mutational analysis is really critical in the management of relapse or refractory systemic cases who tend to respond better, as we all know, to targeted therapies like BRAF, MEK inhibitors, but ALK inhibitors as well, much more and faster than conventional salvage chemotherapy. Next slide. So we submitted an abstract to the ASH meeting, and approval is pending. Looking at all this data in more details. Next slide. Our next steps, we're working on a manuscript. We're hoping to submit in early 2025, maybe this spring. We're trying to collect more missing data and to finish all the central pathology review data as well. We'd like to remain open for the next 4 years. That will depend on further funding. We're working on that. And if we do have further funding, we would like to have at least 1 or maybe 2 more focused manuscripts on the most common RHDs, potentially with more mutational analysis. And with the biobank, we try to encourage enrollment, and we hopefully would like to in the future use these samples for more biological studies and mutational analysis. Next slide. I would like to thank our sponsors, the HA and the Histocytosis Association of Canada, the Histocyte Society. Next slide. And these are all my acknowledgements, my colleagues from North America and South America and in Europe as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Usama, for that wonderful update on the registry. We do have a question coming in from the audience. Carmen is asking us, does the Rare Disease Registry perform extensive molecular analysis? We typically only send BRAF on initial diagnosis.
So it's not in our budget or goals to do that at the moment. We're hoping that if we can put more funding, that we'll be able to do that. But again, the registry is not intended for clinical use. It's only for the integrity of the data. In some cases, like Jean-Francois Emile in Paris, he's done more molecular analysis as part of his samples, but we don't do it. We don't really request it. It's just done if possible, if the pathologist is able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. So Usama, do you collect fairly comprehensive treatment data for the registry, or is it relatively lesser? I was just curious to know.
Well, initially we asked to collect more detailed treatment data. In our experience, that has not been successful. It's more feasible if you just collect the what type of drugs were given, what type of protocol, and the targeted therapies, the name of the drugs and the duration. It becomes cumbersome to all the collaborators to get very much details on the
Understood. It's impressive though. The survival rate seems quite good despite the recurrences. We have one last question and then we'll move on to the next. So Christy is asking, who should we reach out to if we have patients? We would like to enroll patients but are not an enrolling center.
So we left that in our last slide with the registry email, and you can email me or email our CRA, Arnell, but you can email, it's in the last slide.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing the webinar. There will be a recording. So Christy, you should be able to see that or look Usama up on the internet. Thank you. Thank you so much, Usama.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I think we will move ahead to the next presentation, which will be by Milan Minkov. He will be giving us an update on LCH-IV. Go ahead, Milan.
Time to unmute. Now I have it. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon from Vienna. I'm privileged to give you a concise update on the LCH-IV trial, which is running now for more than 10 years. And I hope that very soon we can put a number here and to close it successfully. The data I'm showing today have a cutoff of February 13. So the trial was very complex, very ambitious, having many strata, most of them being interventional, but also two observational strata. I'm going to focus today, due to the time limitation, on stratum 1 and stratum 2, because they are the primary strata. All other strata are salvage or second-line strata, and there have no randomized questions inside. So due to this excellent collaboration under the umbrella of Histiocyte Society, having more than 24 countries participating in the trial, we have recruited more than 2,000 patients in those years. And those are impressive numbers, but of course, if you go to the different strata, you'll see that the numbers are getting smaller. So you can see here the recruitment by year, and due to the pandemics, maybe there's a tiredness after so many years of running the trial, or definitely there are also some competing trials using new drugs and so on. Therefore, the numbers have declined during the last some years. Nevertheless, here you see the numbers in Stratum 1. This is the first-line treatment for patients with either multisystem LCH or multifocal bolus CNS risk lesions. And in both groups, we intended to have each 400 randomizations. We have achieved this in group 2 for the multifocal bolus and the CNS risk, but we still need another randomization, other patients in group 1 in the multisystem LCH. Here you see the number of group 1, and in February we have 336 patients randomized. At the moment we are just about 350. Another 40 to 50 patients are needed to successfully close the trial. So we hope to be able to reach it in 1 to 1.5 years, but of course we need your support in the final spurt. I would like to focus a little bit on group 2 because have the good news that we have achieved our goal here. Here a summary of the more than 600 patients recruited into this group 1. They are for different reasons. So the patients who are ineligible, then there were patients who were not evaluable, also due to the protocol for non-responders, they couldn't be randomized. So at the end of the day, we have 495 patients potentially eligible for randomizations, and 442 have been randomized. This means that the randomization rate was acceptable, and as was expected, with almost 90%. And here you see the number of randomizations per year. Of course, 2022 we closed this group for randomizations because we have reached the numbers. Here shortly to show you that the arm A and arm E were the 6 and 12 months arms were quite well balanced due to the randomizations. Also with respect to time point of randomization, because some patients who responded very well were eligible after initial course 1, some after initial course 2, but in both arms you have that there's a quite good balance. This was the reason why we have to randomize more than 400 patients, because we had a lot of missing follow-up data, and we performed huge efforts from the reference center here, but also the national PIs to improve the situation. There were patients who due and overdue. This means missing follow-ups for more than some years. This year we have concentrated on those groups, overdue and due patients, and the situation has really improved over the last year. So I had better data, and therefore the Data Safety Monitoring Committee allowed us now, after sufficient follow-up, to open the data and to see what we have achieved. And here is the result. You see that between the treatment duration of 6 months and 12 months, there was no difference. It was not according to our expectation, but it is those are numbers, it is a result which helps us to make decisions in the future. We have a median observation time of 3.1 years, and I'm sure that it is even better now because over the last 9 months, we achieved a lot of missing data. There is an abstract submitted for the meeting and go, and those of you who are there, we have the time to see some more details. and some additional analysis, and we'll try to prepare publication by the beginning of the next year. Stratum 2, very shortly. Here we have still opened this trial because we reached a sample size of 100 patients, but once again, there are patients still not reaching the end of treatment and patients with missed follow-up information. Therefore, the Data Safety Monitoring Committee suggested to still keep it open in order to have really the numbers we need for the final analysis. And here's summary of what I already have presented. I don't like to repeat it once again, just saying that for all other strata, there are no randomized questions. There have been some patients in stratum 3, which is the salvage stratum for patients with risk cognitive involvement. We have some additional patients in the stratum 5, which is for the CNS disease. But we will close all those strata once we have closed stratum 1, group 1. And I hope that this will happen within the next 1 to 2 years. Thank you.
No, that's great. Milan, huge amount of work, huge number of patients, you know, and it's nice to see that it's finally coming to fruition. It is definitely interesting, your results in terms of the 6 versus 12 months maintenance. You know, I'm surprised too. I might have guessed it to be different, but the data are what they are. Currently, we don't have any questions yet coming in from the audience, but I know that we're all looking forward to hearing the results. And hopefully with Milan's presentation, we can encourage individuals to enroll their patients so the study can be completed and hopefully closed and then analyzed and the data released. I know that it's definitely a difficult time now with the inhibitors and trying to get patients enrolled on the study, but it's a really important study that needs to be completed.
But for those who come to Goa, some additional details on group 2 can be shown there.
Okay, yeah, that would be wonderful. Well, an enticement for people to come to Goa. All right, thank you so much, Milan. We appreciate your presentation. All righty, I think we will move ahead and have Kai speaking about the HLH. Oh, sorry, your FHL2/3 study. I apologize. Please, Kai, take it over.
Right, now it'll work.
Yeah, Kai, can you get it on full screen if you don't mind?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep,
So this is
perfect.
about the HLH registry, but it's as well about projects who have arisen from the HLH registry. And I'm having this talk on behalf of Stefan Ehl and myself, who are chairing the registry. The registry was started recruitment in 2016. It was founded because, as you know, in 2011, recruitment for the HLH 2004 study finished, and we felt that it's necessary to document the different treatment approaches internationally. So the registry was founded together with Histiocyte Society and the European Society of Immunodeficiencies. In 2019, there was a small amendment. The key fact was that recruitment was extended, so there is no definite end of recruitment for the registry. And in 2021, we did the first analysis evaluation of the first 5 years and added some items that we felt were good to have for future patients. So then in spring 2024, these first 5 years could be published in Blood with a title that etoposide in HLH patients is better than its reputation. And up to now, and for 2024, 287 patients have been registered. So this is the international recruitment, and as you can see, it is not an even distribution of the participants of the Histiocyte Society and of the European Society of Immunodeficiencies. The study center is in Germany, and this is reflected in the participation. So the largest part is from Germany. But as well, Egypt has been very active. Yasmin El-Chasli and Sarah Mekaya have done a tremendous job collecting more than 70 patients. And Switzerland, the US, Israel, the Czech Republic, Poland, and other countries have contributed patients. So this is from the paper that was published this year. The registry focuses on hereditary forms of HLH. So, and this reflects the distribution of the main contributors where FHL3 is most prominent. And we have a well evaluated outcome. So you can see the Kaplan-Meier curves on the top. And on the left-hand side, what you can see and what is most crucial is the Kaplan-Meier curve for patients that were treated with etoposide, which were most of the patients. So the registry is not focused on etoposide treatment only, but most of the patients were treated with this drug. And the 3-year overall survival was 77%. In the middle is the green curve of the asymptomatic siblings that were registered as well in the registry. And as you can see, survival is 100%, which really underscores that early recognition of the disease substantially improves survival in these patients, and which really is an incentive that future options for newborn screening for these conditions would be clinically relevant. And on the right-hand side, figure F is the curve after transplant, and 3-year overall survival after stem cell transplantation is 84%. So if you compare with historical data in the table at the bottom, so the HLH 2004 and the HLH registry, you can see that there's a substantial increase in overall survival from 59 to 77%. And this is as well reflected in pre-HCT survival from 83 to 91% and post-HCT survival from 70 to 85%. And these outcomes of the HLH registry, they compare well with other. This is etoposide only on the right-hand side, and it compares with other drugs that are used for first-line treatment in HLH. So a more detailed table from the paper. So the paper is out. You can reread this anytime. So median time of diagnosis has decreased substantially since the 94 study by more than a half. And this, we think, as well contributes to the good results. The pre-HCT survival, what you saw already in the last table, but here with the HLH-94 study, increased from 73 to 83 to 91%, and survival after transplant with the new conditioning regimens improved from 66 to 70 to 86%. And the same is true for the overall survival from 50 to 79%. So there was the key paper of the registry. The registry continues recruitment, and these kind of registries, they are always in nucleus for other projects. And because they're, in particular for FHL2 and FHL3, there are gene therapy projects ongoing internationally. It was felt that it's required to have a deep and thorough analysis of FHL2 and 3 patients only. This project is done by Stefan Ehlen Freiburg, and it is about to tell us which prognosis can you expect today if you are born with a biallelic mutation and perforin or MUNC13. So the inclusion criteria are MUNC13 and perforin deficiencies and disease manifestation and diagnosis between 2010 and 2020. Many of you have already contributed to this. This was quite complicated because the group in Freiburg, they wanted to include as many patients as possible. The patients from the HLH registry, from national registries, and from the EBMT registries were included. And as you can expect, data fields were different. So there was quite a task to unite all these registries and then check for doublets and so on and so forth. But finally, there are more than 300 patients registered, and there is still some data collection ongoing, and then analysis will start. So half of the patients are FHL2 and half of the patients are FHL3 patients. Another project that has arisen from the registry, but not only include registry patients, is the safety and efficacy of donor lymphocytes infusions in HLH patients. So this includes 24 patients. Analysis is ongoing. So this is just a brief overview over some data. So of these 24 patients, 14 patients did not achieve a response, and 10 patients achieved a response, either partial or complete. And in this table, you can see, if you look at it in detail, it is reflected that the variability of parameters is very high. So T cell dose, start of treatment, initial chimerism. So there was a lot of variability. And we could not find so far a predictor of whether DLI treatment will be efficient or not. Not in the type of donor, not in the amount and the timing of DLIs. So the analysis for this is ongoing. Yeah, and with this, I would like to close. These are the groups and sponsors who have supported the registry. It is not supported by a commercial sponsor. And these are the contributors to the study who contributed patients. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Kai, so much for the presentation. It's really impressive, to be honest, how many patients you've been able to accrue for the FHL2, FHL3 study. So I know we all look forward to, the data that will be coming out of that study. It's a true testimony to you for collecting this data from all over the world. So we look forward to that. I'm curious, for the manuscript that was published in Blood, your outcomes are quite good, obviously, compared to historical controls. Do you think that that was related in part to reporting bias, or have any thoughts about it? Or is it just historical, we have better supportive care now?
Better supportive care, shorter time to diagnosis, quicker and more precise diagnosis. So physicians are usually more sure that it's really a transplantable condition. So the registry is it's not a treatment study, but still it is prospective. So once patients present, they are registered. So I hope that the reporting bias is low, but obviously it's not a treatment study and not as strict as a treatment study.
Understood. We have one more question that's come for you, which is, where were the DLI patients treated? Which countries?
Germany and the UK.
Got you. Great. Well, thank you so much, Kai. It's very interesting. Appreciate your presentation. And now we will move on to Michael Jordan, who will be talking about the INTO-HLH registry.
Okay. All right. You guys hear me and see my screen okay?
We can hear you and we can see your screen. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for opportunity to talk about the other registry, the INTO-HLH registry. So this is a registry that stands for the Insights into the Natural History and Treatment Outcomes of Hemophagocytic Lymphohistiocytosis. So this is a registry in North America. It's not as international as the HS registry you're just hearing about. So, but I think it's a fair question to start with is, why another HLH registry? And because of course we already have the HS registry, and there are also other ones we haven't heard about, say registries for adults with HLH, for instance. And so, but in brief, and I'll touch on this again momentarily, is that that really, in terms of the detailed natural history data around around HLH and patients with HLH, the literature actually remains relatively sparse. So we have good data in terms of outcomes, in terms of survival outcomes from the society studies. We have some additional data regarding response characteristics, for instance, from the emapalumab study. And of course, we have the data you just heard in terms of looking at survival outcomes in the patients with, that were noted on the registry, on the society registry. But there's really not a lot of other details, like what does response look like? What sort of complications do patients experience? Et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of opinion out there. And so really there's a gap in this sort of detailed natural history data. And when we move beyond familial HLH, this gap is even wider. So really sense that there's a need for this sort of gap. And current efforts, are not really designed to try to fill this sort of detailed data gap. And so when the opportunity arose, I thought this was worth the time and effort to pursue this. So, so just a few examples. Like there are a lot of things we know about treating HLH. Like we know that standard therapy can work. We know that treating these patients can be difficult, but we know the patients are thriving long term. Some patients, not all. We also know there's lots of new therapies that have been that are being developed or have been developed in recent years. But in all these cases, we don't really know response characteristics in terms of even sort of standard approaches. We don't understand what necessarily to expect, apart from say, limited sort of retrospective series, and how often are treatments adjusted. These sorts of details are not really well reported, and how often do we use sort of alternative approaches? And this is an increasing issue with increasing treatment options. But also, what sorts of adverse events do patients experience? What's their hospitalization patterns or sort of ICU utilization? These things that I think it's important for us to understand this sort of nuance that will impact ultimately how we treat our patients when we have increasing sort of treatment options available to us. So there's limitations in long-term data. And of course, one of the reasons to think about this registry is that if we have multiple treatment options, is how do we understand how to compare them ultimately? And I think this would be an initial effort in that direction. So, so there's of course lots of opportunity for people to report their local experience and their own expert opinion. And this has certainly been useful, but it has its limitations. Clinical trials are rigorous and probably some of the highest quality data out there, but obviously they're not always feasible. And they're limited in their nature. And then, of course, registries, there is the issue of enrollment bias, which is always true for registries and makes it somewhat difficult to compare to non-registry type studies. But nonetheless, I think they certainly have a key role. And I don't necessarily need to go through all of this, but the main thing is that there have been prior efforts which have been really moved the field forward, and there are ongoing efforts with the society registry in particular. And so hopefully this registry can really complement these other efforts. So an example of how do we build an in-depth registry sort of effort in a rare disease. So the exemplar here, of course a traditional registry is the patient consents and a staff would take data from predefined data fields and put them into some sort of form and send that to the coordinating center in a typically de-identified sort of fashion. So the central coordinating center actually can't necessarily guarantee the quality of the data because they don't have the source documents oftentimes. And so there are limitations in terms of how the depth and the quality of that data. The CDCRN has a registry called Accelerate for Castleman's disease. So this is just an example from another rare disease that's been open now actually for more than 5 years. I think it's more like 7 years, that has sort of traditional arm like this, but also has what they call a patient-powered arm, where with the consent of patients, patients are enrolled, but also they consent to have their records released. And then the records are abstracted centrally, and so there's always a source document available there to make sure that the data are complete and correct, and they can be fully audited. And so the Castleman's Registry has enrolled more than 600 patients, and they found a number of things in terms of patients with a diagnosis. Not all of them actually have Castleman's, but they're able to do things such as expert review of pathology, expert review and reclassification of patients to sort of help sort of more deeply understand the patients with a diagnosis of Castleman's. So what's the framework for INTO-HLH? So we're taking this inspiration from Accelerate. So first I'd point out is that the reason we're able to do this more in-depth approach is that SOBI has been providing funding for this study. We anticipate that we'll be transitioning away from industry funding in future years, but they've really been instrumental in getting this process up and going. So it's really a partnership between SOBI and Cincinnati Children's. So we're the central study site, and we're executing and overseeing the study and partnering increasingly with other sites. But SOBI has been backing this effort to date, and in part because they recognize that there is a real a gap in terms of actual data in the field, in terms of patient outcomes after treatment. So when a patient consents to participate, they can consent either via e-consent through our website, which I'll list the website at the end here. So this can be done in sort of in a fully automated fashion if they desire, or it can be done in person if they're, for instance, at our site, or via phone if they'd like to reach out that way. But the patient also, at that time, is also asked to consent to release of medical records, which if they're willing and able to do that, then we can proceed in terms of obtaining records centrally and storing them securely, but also abstracting them centrally into our database. And we abstract the data into our database. And then eventually our goal is that we would then utilize these data in a de-identified fashion for publication. We would like to be sharing with the HS registry as well. And then ultimately, SOBI has the potential to be interested in seeing de-identified data as well, and potentially for interacting with the FDA. So, but our partnerships also include Nacho via the Nacho Bio biologic specimens and sharing protocol that's active in the Nacho network, which covers more than actually 42 sites now in North America. But this protocol allows for data and specimen collection across the network, and we have a sharing agreement in place. And we would be coordinating this in a de-identified fashion using what's called a global unique identifier. And this allows us to be able to annotate clinical samples, but also share data in a way that maintains the de-identified status. So an overview of the registry. So our inclusion is very broad. So any consenting individual with suspected or confirmed diagnosis of HLH, that is any type of HLH, a child or adult, is potentially eligible for the registry. And this also includes deceased patients, which may be enrolled with the assistance of next of kin. And so we really, this is an important point, that both survivors and non-survivors can be incorporated into the registry for us to analyze all kinds of outcomes of patients. But the primary objective is, I think I've already kind of made clear, is really to describe the natural history of the disease under therapy for patients treated in North America. And I'll explain why North America in just a moment. But the secondary objectives are listed here. I'm not going to read them all off, but I would summarize them by saying we want to understand what are the response characteristics and adverse events that patients experience in their long-term outcomes. And so you can see the secondary and the exploratory objectives right there. This is also going to be linked to specimen collection as well, to better understand biologic aspects of the disease that are not currently understood. So as hopefully I've made clear, the advantages is that this sort of detailed data will allow high quality and in-depth assessment of patient outcomes of all of these sort of aspects of the outcomes. And also by having sort of the full medical record, we can actually sort of ask questions utilizing expert review panels to really understand, do we think this diagnosis is correct, for instance, or a number of sorts of expert panel reviews will be possible with the more complete and more definite data. Limitations, and this is the main limitation here, is because this is done centrally abstraction, the records actually have to be in English, and really, unfortunately, they have to be from either US or Canada, because of our ethical approvals and our ability to sort of manage medical records from these two countries. So that's a major limitation. The other limitation, of course, is that this sort of approach does take time, and therefore it's obviously as well more expensive to pursue. So just a little summary slide here for sort of, you might say, patient facing, right? So just to summarize things that, with consent, the idea is that the registry team will collect information from the patient's medical records, covering, in this case, we've defined it as a 5 years timeframe around the HLH diagnosis. This information will include the progression of the condition, its complications and treatments and outcomes. And obviously we'll also be gathering information that the patients will provide us about its impact on their quality of life and long-term outcomes. Of course, a key central part of this is that we need to make sure that we're guaranteeing the confidentiality of the patient's records, and we maintain the records securely, and we utilize either HIPAA or FIPA guidelines, depending on the country of the patient's origin, and the data are anonymized and maintained in an anonymized fashion in our database, and of course in any of our sharing arrangements as well. So what about progress? Where are we? So we've been going for really getting this up and running over the last couple of years, and so we're beginning to make some good progress. So we've consented to over 120 patients. We have 109 patients with sort of all the completed forms. As you imagine, it's beyond consent to get the process rolling in terms of obtaining records. But we have 91 patient records in the abstraction process, and 61 of which have detailed baseline sort of data abstraction with response sort of data abstraction ongoing. And we are happy to say that at the society meeting in Goa this fall, we'll be presenting an abstract regarding this initial sort of analysis of our patient populations to date and patients in the registry. So thank you for your interest. And if you Google INTO-HLH, or you simply go to HLHregistry.org, you'll find our website. And on our website there, like I said, if there are patients that would like to get involved, they can actually directly consent there through an electronic consent module, or can ask to be contacted. And so personnel can reach out to the individual that may want to participate. So thank you very much.
That's great, Mike. Thank you so much. We did have a question from the audience. Do you have to be a part of the NACHO consortium to enroll the patient on the registry? But I think you've addressed that question. Yeah, patients and providers from North America can enroll their patients by accessing that email and website that you mentioned, correct?
Exactly. So the patient can either simply consent themselves through the electronic consent module, or if there's anybody that would like to be contacted, then they can just simply reach out through the contact us sort of function on the website to be contacted directly. So I think the main thing is that if there are patients, if there are individuals that are listening that are physicians that are outside of the NACHO network, and they have patients that may want to enroll, the main thing is to let them know about the registry and reach out, if they'd like to be contacted more directly, or they should reach out to us. But it's very easy to do.
That's great. Thank you. I had one quick question, and then we'll move on to the next session. But I was curious, in today's world, I mean, at least in certain parts of the country, people are, concerned about confidentiality and sharing records. And I know that you've got all the protections in place, but have you come across, parents who are concerned about sharing records. And I also wondered, like, how does the study obtain the records that are relevant only to the HLH episode, or do they just get all the records and then parse out those that are relevant to HLH? I'm just curious about that process.
Yeah, so it's a time window. You know, we ask. So I think I would say, first off, I'd say is that I think that I think most people obviously would ask that question and say, hey, is this, how does this work, right? To make sure that I mean, you know, there's varying degrees of concern about confidentiality, but I think most people that are, let's say, are
Comfortable.
you know, have been in the healthcare system a long time, are aware of that issue. So, so I think that's always a fair you know, question and thing to bring up. You know, we like I said, it's really through our procedures. You know, we have excellent clinical research core here. And secure sort of database sort of storage for the records. So I would say the records are as good here as they are at the hospital they started, frankly.
Yeah.
And you know, the database is completely it's completely de-identified, and even the database itself is secured, and it's you know, utilizing the same sort of infrastructure that people use in clinical trials. So it's the same kinds of guidelines of sort of tracking and security. But yes, no, the patients do actually, as part of the enrolling, they give us a little bit of information. In other words, after they consent, we ask for, you know, where were you treated, when were you treated, and so then we reach out to those institutions. And in many cases, it's actually been tremendously helpful to have the patient or the patient's parent actually assist us in terms of dealing with the institutions. Not, I mean, it's not always necessary, but that's a possibility. So, and I think for the most part, you know, patients and families, they want to, these are questions that they want us to answer. And I think they're happy to participate and to help out any way they can. But like I said, you know, we have a framework of, you know, when is a diagnosis made? We look at the records from around that time and sort of set a time point of this was the diagnosis, and that sort of defines the window for records.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. Well, now we're going to go on because we have an exciting update that Kathy's going to present to everyone present on the webinar. So Kathy, take it away.
Okay. Let me share this really quick. Oops. Okay, well, we had mentioned in our advertising for this webinar that we had a couple of exciting announcements for you, and I get the honor and privilege of sharing the first one. And I'll preface all of this by saying that the Society Board did a strategic planning process we went through at the end of last year, and we came up with these 4 main goals. And I'm not going to get into the strategic planning that is available on the website if anyone's interested in looking deeper into what was discussed and everything that came out of that. But the 2 that I do want to, the one that I want to focus on is the strategic goal number 2, and the 2 points of that is the more valuable internet presence and the updated branding. So there is a couple of reasons why we decided that we wanted to update our branding. First of all, it reflects growth and evolution that has taken place within the society over the last many years. Which is the 40th year of the meeting, the 41st year of the society. So it's been a long time since we've had any kind of updated branding. This helps us to maintain relevance as trends in design and communication styles and audience preferences change. Refreshing our brand helps us to stay relevant, and it appeals to both new and existing audiences. It also helps us to attract new audiences because a fresh look and feel can be really effective in attracting younger and more diverse audiences. And since fostering the next generation was one of our goals as well, it made sense for us to incorporate branding into our initiative. And this will also help us boost engagement because branding can create excitement and reinvigorate interest and deepen our connection with our existing community. So we created a subcommittee of the board, and we started out on the strategic or on the branding process. And the first thing we did was look for pictures and things that inspired us. And we looked at some of the pathology and different things about histiocytosis. And we were able to boil that down into this particular color palette. And so what I am so excited to share with you is that we have a brand new logo. And while we understand that thinking about our current / old logo evokes a sense of nostalgia and nostalgia. Let me get back here. We wanted to incorporate, keep some of the old elements in with the new branding. So we did keep the color, the main color blue, and we kept the cell that was in the middle of the logo. So drum roll, please.
The perfect.
This is the brand new logo for the Histiocyte Society. And you'll notice in the smaller, this was quite a long process. It was a very exciting process to embark on. And we are excited to see this roll out over our website and our materials in the coming months. You will see this branding at the GOA meeting and online. And we couldn't be more excited. We hope that you are as well. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kim.
All right, and we have one other big exciting announcement, which is the date and location for our meeting in 2025. Gives me goosebumps. Ready, Kathy? You can advance it to the next slide. We are going to be meeting in Seattle. So the meeting for 2025 will be from September 28th to 30th. Please mark your calendars. We look forward to seeing you this year in GOA and next year in Seattle. So thank you everyone for coming to this webinar. And please don't forget to fill out the survey when it pops up. Thank you panelists for your presentations. You made it a wonderful webinar. Bye everybody, have a great day.